On Afghanistan, the Obama administration is sending, it seems, mixed signals. There's a lot of infighting, but I guess the consensus is that they're leaning towards sending more troops. What are your feelings on this situation?
I hope the Obama administration doesn't decide to send more troops. I think the initial decision taken in the spring to send additional troops was a mistake. Sending even more troops would be an even bigger mistake. The administration ought to be looking at a strategy that envisions a much smaller American military footprint in the country and in the region, not a larger one. But that requires redefining our goals. And our goals should be rather precise, rather narrow, and that is to weaken al-Qaeda, to keep it off balance so that that terrorist network cannot launch major attacks. Our objective should not be to try to get in the middle of an intra-Pashtun quarrel and by targeting the Taliban as our primary enemy. But the Obama administration appears to be drifting in that direction, even although some administration officials have stressed that al-Qaeda is our enemy, not really the Taliban. But if you look at U.S. actions, they seem to be based on the premise that the Taliban is our mortal enemy as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because, during the Iraq War, there was this habit of lumping al-Qaeda and Iraq together. And for many of us in Pakistan who have been following this, it seems now that there is a very convenient, maybe, or accidental lumping together of the Taliban and al-Qaeda. Can you clear up for our viewers what you think the situation really is?
Well, first of all, I think there is this tendency on the part of American policymakers, particularly when they deal with portions of the world where the knowledge base is very small, to conflate very different problems or movements. Not only did American officials tend to combine al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein as a single threat,
right,
but oftentimes they would speak of al-Qaeda and Shiite Iran in the same breath as the same kind of threat. With regard to Afghanistan, because the Taliban government had given al-Qaeda safe haven, there was an almost immediate tendency to see them as a single threat. Some people in the policy community in the United States understand that that's not quite true, that the Taliban is a local ethnic-based movement that probably wouldn't care about the United States one way or the other if we weren't in Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda is a true international network with the United States as its principal adversary.
The Taliban has, or the Pashtuns of Afghanistan, have never really in history had any desire to intervene militarily in other parts of the world. Does the U.S. government understand this?
I would like to think that the U.S. government understands it. I am afraid that while a few policymakers, a few people in the policy community may understand that, a lot of others either don't understand that distinction or choose to ignore it. And I'm not sure which factor is dominant.
In your report, Escaping the Graveyard of Empires, Afghanistan being the graveyard, you have suggested that the Obama administration pull out the majority of American troops within the next 12 to 18 months. Why do you suggest this, and what are the chances do you think this is going to happen?
To answer the second question first, unfortunately, I think the chances are not good that we would downsize in that way. However, it is the right strategy. It would have a much smaller, less intrusive U.S. presence in that part of the world. It would also cause far fewer problems for Pakistan. I think one of the great tragedies of the current policy is that by having such an intrusive presence in Afghanistan, by making enemies among the Pashtun population, we are creating problems not just for ourselves inside Afghanistan, but we're creating huge problems for the government of Pakistan.
Do you think America is going to succeed at building a Jeffersonian democracy in Afghanistan?
I doubt if we could succeed in building a Jeffersonian democracy in Afghanistan if we had a millennium. We're certainly not going to be able to do it within a few years, which does appear to be the time horizon of U.S. policy.
So, as many in Pakistan believe, in your mind also, the U.S. doesn't have the willpower to stay for a decade or two or three, as it may take, to make it a manageable nation state.
Americans have never had a great deal of patience for policies that don't produce quick and decisive results. And Afghanistan is precisely the arena for an endless mission with murky and frustrating results at best.
To what extent do you believe that the Afghan war is undermining Pakistan's own sovereignty?
I think the Afghan war is, in a number of ways, undermining let me try that again. The war in Afghanistan is, in a number of ways, undermining Pakistan's stability. And that ultimately is a much more important issue from the standpoint of legitimate U.S. interests. Pakistan is a key power in that part of the world. It is a nuclear-armed power. The last thing we want to do is to see greater instability arise, creating the danger of Pakistan becoming a failed state and raising the issue of what to do about the nuclear weapons.
The United States has spent upwards of $228 billion in Afghanistan. In Pakistan, over the last 10 years, they have spent some $12 billion in military assistance, and there was some non-military assistance in there. And now they propose another $7.5 billion over the next 5 years. Being that Pakistan is a nuclear-armed state, and Afghanistan is a state that hasn't really intervened in anyone else's affairs, with the exception of this al-Qaeda situation post 9/11. Why is the U.S. focused on Afghanistan more so than it is on Pakistan? It seems a bit lopsided.
You have to understand the traumatic quality of the 9/11 attacks. Americans reacted in a terribly frightened way to that. Afghanistan seemed to be the source of that attack. So Americans immediately focused on that and felt that we had to achieve a decisive military victory, basically to eradicate al-Qaeda. And gradually that came to mean eradicate al-Qaeda and the Taliban. So it's hard to get Americans to understand that Afghanistan is really, at most, a secondary theater in this struggle, that Pakistan's stability and well-being is significantly more important to the United States than Afghanistan's stability and well-being would ever be.
Dr. Carpenter, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
Nazreen, we'll be back with you after a short break. I have Malou Innocent waiting in the wings.